Hello everyone, and welcome to our online version of worship for Sunday the 31st of July. You know, Jesus spent a lot of time talking about money and possessions, more than any other subject. And I think that the reason is because most people have trouble with always wanting just a little bit more. Jesus said it's not really money that's the problem. The problem is greed. And greed is often disguised. But it's there, often hidden. Each time discontentment arises in us, it's a sign. Greed is lurking in the background. A reading from Luke chapter 12. Someone in the crowd said to him, Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And then he told him a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things that you have prepared, whose will they be?" So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God. Today we have a parable called The Rich Fool. It's a parable about money, it's a parable about greed, but it's also about more than money. I think when you first read the parable, you think, this is kind of a parable about money. I'm not really worried too much about money just now. This doesn't have much to do with me. But actually, when you think about it, when you go way, way back to the very first story in the Bible, if you go way back to Genesis, and remember Adam and Eve are in the garden and they can eat any of the fruit from the trees in the garden they want. There's one tree though, the knowledge of good and evil. That particular tree, don't eat from that fruit. That's the only tree that they're not to eat from. And of course, the story goes, that's the one that they want. That's the tree that they want to eat from. That's the fruit. And you know, it's just there's so many ways to think about that. But one way certainly is we always just want something more. Whatever we have, there's always that other piece of fruit. There's always that other apple or whatever kind of tree it was, right? We're always looking for something else, wanting just a little bit more of whatever it is we have. Why is contentment so hard to find? Yeah. So Jesus addresses this and more in this parable that we've come to call this parable the parable of the rich fool. And basically it's about a man a farmer, who produced a terrific crop, did extremely well, and his barns were too small to hold all the grain, and so he decides to build bigger barns, which he does. And then he stores all his grain in his barn, and then he says, I'm going to tear them down, build these new barns. And then he says to himself, we get his inner dialogue in the text, he says, "You've done well, you've made it, you can retire, take it easy, have the time of your life, eat, drink, be merry, do what you want. You've done a great job. And the parable ends with God saying, fool, tonight you will die. And then what's going to happen to all your stuff? Who's going to get all your stuff? Yeah, all your barn full of goods. Who gets it? And Jesus says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. So, it's one of these parables on first reading. I mean, we'd all agree with it, really. You'd say, well, that's true. That's true. I mean, be aware of greed. That's a good teaching. And I think we would all say possessions and money can't buy us the important things in life. I think we would agree with that. Like money can't buy us health or a happy home life or peace of mind. So upon first reading, when Jesus warns against the foolishness of looking to money or things or your stuff to make you happy, on first reading, we would be tempted to put this parable to the side because we would say initially, we totally agree with it. It makes sense to us. It's sort of common sense wisdom. And particularly, it's common sense wisdom, you might think, particularly if you're at a point in your life where you're really not too worried about money because you have enough. And, but as with all of Jesus' teaching, and it is interesting that he did speak about money more than anything else. He did speak about possessions and wealth and all our stuff more than any other thing. When you reflect upon the parable, it can start to open up other truths, deeper meanings and insights. And the context is so fascinating because the whole teaching is set up with someone coming up to Jesus and asking a question about a family inheritance. And the question is, Jesus, tell my brother, this is verse 13, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. So it seems like there's some family inheritance issue. Two brothers are arguing about it. Someone goes up to Jesus and says, Jesus, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And he refuses. Jesus refuses to get involved in this family conflict. But instead, what he does is he steps back, and I think really he discerns the heart of the matter, as he always does. He's always looking below the surface. He's always looking at the motivation, the subtext, really. He points out the underlying problem. So initially the guy's saying, tell my brother to be fair with me and divide the inheritance. Jesus says, no, I'm not getting involved in that. Beware of greed, he says. And then he tells that parable of the rich fool. So this man asks Jesus to get involved in the family problem. Jesus looks below the surface and says, it's almost like he's saying, no, you're giving me the impression here that you're concerned about your fair share and getting what's rightfully yours, but something else is going on here. Something else is going on here. This isn't just about getting your fair share. The thing on the table isn't really the thing on the table. What's really going on is greed. And then he gives the parable of the rich fool. Now, it seems to be, I think, one of the reasons why Jesus speaks about money and our stuff so much is because whatever we have, most people, whatever we have in terms of money or clothes or homes or cars or salaries or pensions or whatever, most of us are very, very protective, first of all, about what we have. We protect it, we want to keep it. And many of us wouldn't mind just a little bit more, quite frankly. We're always kind of looking for a little bit more. So I'm talking here now about once our basic needs are met, because if I was giving this teaching to people who did not have their basic needs met, I don't think I would be taking this angle in this teaching at all. So I think context is really important. This is we're talking about after our basic needs are met. We have our shelter, we have our food, we have our clothing, we have all that, right? After that, vast majority of people have trouble being content with what they have. It's not really about being poor, it's not really about being rich. Poor people can have trouble with greed, and poor people can have a lot of trouble being content. Rich people can have a lot of trouble with greed, and rich people can have a lot of trouble being content, and in between people, same thing. So it's not so much about having a lot or having a little. It seems to be the makeup of humans, generally speaking, are always looking for something a little bit more. There's a lack of contentment. And Jesus in the parable says that, you know, he's called a fool, basically, not because he's rich. He's called a fool not because he's a good businessman and he can make some profit and even have big barns. That's not the issue. He's called a fool, interestingly enough, because he's not rich toward God. It's like, well, what does that mean? Yeah, you have everything you want, but you're not rich toward God, so you're foolish. So that's interesting. That's just worth keeping in the back of your mind when we're looking at this parable. What does it mean to be rich toward God? He could secure everything he needed in his life, but he really had no thought of God. Yeah. So one of the things that Jesus is saying is that beware of this desire for more, whatever that more is, by the way. Beware of it. Because this kind of desire can take over. It needn't be money. It could be something else. But it is a discontent of sorts. And it can take over and it can guide your life and it can influence you. And worst thing is, you can end up having the money, the big barns or the big bank account. You can end up having it and you can be still wanting. You can miss out. Remember, in the parable, the fool never gets to enjoy any of his labor, by the way, because he dies before he even gets to eat, drink, and be merry, right? So in the parable, he never ever does get it in the end. He works, accumulates, has lots of stuff, has lots of money, never really has the time. Time runs out on him before he can enjoy it. So again, this farmer, the rich man, it's his inner dialogue. When he speaks to himself, this is kind of a clue, I think, to what the parable's about. Because he ends up with all of this wealth and he says, well, what shall I do? So it's very ego-centered. I will do this, he says. I'll pull down my barns. I'll build bigger ones. I'll store my grain. I will say to myself, you have ample goods and years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. And then God, at the end of the parable, butts in and says, fool, tonight your life will be demanded from you. And then the parable just sort of ends. It's like, oh wow, it's like this is the night you die. You've run out of time. Now what? This night's over. What's going to happen now with all the stuff you've worked for? Who's going to get that? And who'll squander that? All your years, all your plans of eat, drink, and be merry, it's gone. You don't have that kind of control, in other words, God said. You're planning on things that you have absolutely no control over at all. You're thinking, oh, this is going to happen, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And then God says, foolish. is foolish. You know, I'm wondering about this parable. I wonder if one of the bottom lines of this parable is, one of the core teachings is, the heart of the matter is security, right? You know, because see, when you think about this, if you could buy security, no price would be too great, right? If you could. Like if you could buy your health, no prices would be too great. If you could buy your children's safety, your grandchildren's safety, no, that would be, yeah, well, how much? You're willing to pay whatever. If you could if you could buy a long, happy, peaceful life, if you could buy that kind of security, you'd say, yeah, how much? No price is too great. If somehow it's like, how about I sell you an anxious-free life? Really? Is that possible? Yeah. You can buy it. An anxious, you don't ever have to worry or be anxious again. You would want to buy that, right? Because in our world, these are the things that we are looking for, and these are the things that we cannot buy. But what happens is, and it's happened from the very beginning, from Adam and Eve, is that we try to pay for these things and secure these things in other ways. So the man in the parable is not rich toward God because he's looking in all sorts of other places to find that kind of security. Now, he's used money. So he's thinking, you know, if I've got enough, I'll be able to relax and I'll be able to be happy and I'll be able to be merry and eat and drink and I'll be fine. It's like, no, you can't buy that. You can't buy that kind of peace of mind. It doesn't work that way. Our world isn't set up that way. He's trying to secure his future. That's what the farmer's doing in the parable. He's trying to secure his life. He wants everything to be good. He wants to be happy. There's nothing wrong with these things, by the way. Who doesn't want to have a happy life, right? He wants enjoyment. He wants a good life. He wants all these things. It's like, well, Jesus, is there something wrong with that? Well, Jesus would say, if you go about securing it in the wrong way, yes, there is a lot wrong with it. Because for Jesus, all these sorts of longings cannot be found in this world. Like the longing for security or the longing for peace of mind, the longing for safety, the longing for protection, all the things that we want for ourselves and our loved ones. Much of that is out of our control. Now, yes, we do have some control, for sure. But I think one of the things that the pandemic has certainly shown us is that we don't have nearly as much control as we thought we had, right? So in a moment, our lives can change drastically. In a moment. It doesn't take a pandemic, of course, to show us this. There's other things, other tragedies that can show us the same truth. But, you know, most of us in the last couple of years have come to realize, yeah, wow, things are not as secure as I thought they were. People can go away, things can change, I can change. The little routines that we would get into to give us comfort, that we knew that would always be there, they can go away and change. And that shakes our security. It reminds us really. And Jesus is saying, yeah, it's foolish thinking to think that you can buy your own power, secure the deepest needs and longings of our heart. You'll never ever be able to do that by yourself. Now, you can spend a lifetime pursuing it, You can spend all your energy and your life's work pursuing and trying to find that peace of mind and contentment and security. But the reason it's foolish is because I think that Jesus is pointing out that in this world, the way that the world is set up is absolutely not possible. I mean, the only hope that we have is walking through life hand in hand with God. It's the only hope we have. It's the only inclination that we're ever going to have of safety and security in this world that is forever changing. It's the only way. And so when we try to secure everything by ourselves and by our own strength and make things work in our own way, many of us, and we've experienced this, it's a miserable life because we can't. You know, we find ourselves failing. But when we fail, I think, you know, when we realize when our world comes tumbling down in some way, I think it's a reminder that's like, yeah, this is actually the way life is. Life, and remember Jesus saying, in the world you'll have trouble. I mean, he was really clear, right? He was really clear about this. He says, in the world you'll have trouble. But I've overcome the world. In other words, we can do this together. This was never meant to be a solo project. Remember the man in the parable, it's all about me. I will say to myself, I will build bigger barns. I will fill my barns. I will then, spend and be happy. It's all completely ego-centered. It's all about me. Jesus is saying, that's foolish. That's foolish. You'll never ever find what you want. You'll never find that deep contentment. You'll never find that peace. The only way we can catch a hold of that peace, or let that peace catch a hold of us, is when we're looking in the right places. And the big temptation throughout our entire life is always to be pulled in another direction. It's like Adam and Eve in the apple tree. Let's call it an apple just for the sake of it. They're always looking over there thinking, that's what's going to help. That's what's going to fix me. That's what's going to heal me. That's what's going to make everything okay. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not. We need something bigger than the apple, right? We need something bigger than the barn. We need something bigger than the bank account. And you know who Jesus is pointing to, right? Yeah. Come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden. I will give you rest. It's when we're together with God, guiding us, helping us, giving us the strength. That's when we can go through anything. And in a way, when we're rich toward God, if something happens to the barn and then we don't have anything anymore, we've still got that. That can't ever be taken away from us, right? Emmanuel, our own sense of that God is with us, that can never be taken away. It doesn't really matter what happens to the barns, whether the barn is full or whether it's empty. It's like, you know what? I've always got this. I'm always in Christ. Always. That can never be taken away, no matter what happens in this world. And that's ultimately the security that we need. And that's the longing of every heart, is to have that absolute secure sense that we're safe in Christ. Yeah, there's the prayer. There's the heart cry. When we're looking at other things to help us get through or make it or be happy or be fulfilled or feel safe or not be lonely or whatever it is, it's like, yeah, well, there's certain things we can do. But I think that most of us have found for the deeper longings of the heart, that is not something that we can do by ourselves. That's what we need God for. Amen. Jesus at the center of it all. Jesus at the center of it all. From beginning to the end, it will always be, it's always been you, Jesus. Jesus, nothing else matters. Nothing in this world will do. Jesus, you're the center. Everything revolves around you. Jesus, you. Jesus, be the center of my life. Jesus, be the center of my life. From beginning to the end, it will always be, it's always been you, Jesus. Jesus, nothing else matters. Nothing in this world will do. Jesus, you're the center. Everything revolves around you. Jesus, you. From my heart to the heavens, Jesus be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the heavens, Jesus be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the heavens, Jesus be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the heavens, Jesus be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. Jesus be the center of your church. Jesus be the center of your church. And every knee will bow, and every tongue shall confess you, Jesus. Jesus.